my manuscripts were gone with the wind. So I went ahead and decided to seek my fortune in music. Thank you for laughing, because seriously, nobody can really make a fortune in music unless you're John Williams or the Beatles or whatever the case may be. So, but nonetheless, I went off to do my musical thing. And I'm going to jump forward now all the way to St. Louis. When I moved to St. Louis, I was already a music producer. I was already doing some things, and the company that I worked for was a production company. They did animations. They did a little bit of industrials and commercials. I had written some music and things for Anheuser-Busch, for Ralston Purina. So I was in that industry, enjoying my time as a music producer for a company. And 1 year after I got my first real job, this is my first real job. This wasn't right after college. This was much later. My first real job. And I bought a house. Yay! 3 months after I closed on that house, the company I worked for went belly up. They filed for bankruptcy. And I'm trying to stand here in the driveway one more time with Granny saying, there's nothing in the world that's ever happened. What couldn't have been worse? The good thing is, I had a house. It had a basement. They were liquidating. They had a $100,000 brand new recording studio in that building that they sold me for $17,000. Okay, I could get a loan for that. So now, if I had been in an apartment, I would have had no place to put this. But now I have a house. I built my recording studio. So I am now officially a freelance music producer in St. Louis, Missouri, which is a lovely kind of glorified set of words for unemployed. Freelance, entrepreneur, unemployed. And it was then, in 1991, finally we made it. 1991, for those of you that care. In 1991, my granny had been a widow for about 20 years. Grandpa had died when I was in high school. She was 83 years old. She's walking with a cane. She's always telling me, I can't see anything, Ricky. I just can't see anything. I'm blind in one eye, and I only have a piece of the other. Whatever that means, I'm not exactly sure. But nonetheless, this is what she said. Well, as she was 83 years old, she gets a phone call from a fellow by the name of Pete. He's 87. She knew him back when she lived on the lake. We had built a house for her across the street. When we rebuilt our house after the tornado, we built her a house across the street. So she's not at the lake, she's across the street. My mother comes home and looks across the street, and Granny's car is gone. Okay? Pete had called her on the phone, had not seen her in 25 years. He proposed to her over the phone. She said yes over the phone. Go, Granny. We call it the Day of Miracles because she threw away her cane. Right? She found the keys to her car, blind in one eye and only have a piece of another. And she drove that same day with a phone call 4 hours to Lubbock, Texas to find Pete. Yes, thank you. My mother comes home, looks across the street. There is no car. She's quite concerned. She's called everybody she knows. She thinks there's a kidnapping. She doesn't know what's happened. She's about to call the authorities when the phone rings. Hello? Hi, sis. This is your mama. Sis, Granny, where in the world are you? Oh, sis, don't worry about me. I'm in Lubbock. Lubbock? What in the world are you doing in Lubbock, Granny? Oh, sis, it's such an interesting story. I want to share this with you. It's so interesting. Well, sis. Sis, this would sure be a lot easier if your new papa told you. True quote. So then mother figures out it's Pete, that they're whatever. Now they're not married yet. My mother calls me and says, Ricky, do you know what your granny's up to? As if it's my fault. Right. So Granny, hey Granny, this is Ricky. Hi Ricky, how are you? I said, I'm fine, Granny. I love you, Ricky. I love you too, Granny. You're my favorite, Ricky. And I was. I said, Granny, I understand that you're reconnected with a friend, Pete. Yes, we're getting married. Well, now, Granny, this is good news because I'm happy that, you've got a companion, somebody to be with and spend your days with. But don't you think that you need to have some courtship time? Don't you think this needs to stew a little bit? She says, now you listen to me. At my age, there is no time to wait. She's 83, he's 87, and I cannot argue with this. Okay? No arguing. Granny and me were married 2 weeks to the day from that phone call. Okay, 2 weeks. And the reason it was 2 weeks is because in Texas, your registration of license to the day you can get married required 2 weeks. So they're getting married, and the minister says to you, Bertie Marie, take Pete to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have in the whole this day forward. And there's 2 words you're supposed to say. I do. You know what she said? I surely do. True. She drug him down the aisle. She put him in the passenger side. He was legally blind. He wasn't driving anything. She gets in, and I kid you not, she burned rubber going out of the church parking lot. True. My mother and my aunt are standing in this cloud of dust. My aunt looks at my mother and says, Billy, what in the world do you think they're going to do? My mother did not think that was funny. My mother glared at my aunt. She says, they better be playing cards and dominoes. That's all I want to know. I'm just telling you a story, aren't I? And you're just sitting here going, what does this have to do with anything? But I hope you're having a good time. When Granny married Pete, she went off to be with him. She had to take her few pots and pans and her favorite dresses, and she was gone. We had a house sitting over here that needed to be sold and everything in it. My mother called me. Do you want Granny's sewing machine? No. She calls other people. She calls them back. I've called everybody. Nobody needs or wants the sewing machine, so I'm going to put it in the estate sale. And I remembered that Granny had bought that when she lost her only son in a car wreck. And I thought, what's it going to hurt me to put a sewing machine in my house? It's in a cabinet. I could put a lamp on it. So in 1991, that Sears Kenmore sewing machine made a journey from Wichita Falls, Texas to where I was living in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a musician, freelance, unemployed. So I'm looking at it, and at this time, I am two-stepping. I'm doing a little bit of line dancing, okay? And so I'm thinking, I need to have myself a new shirt so I can go line dancing. So I go into the cloth world, remember them? And I go back to the pattern books. You know what I'm talking about? Those big ones. Do you know where the men's shirts patterns are? In the back. It's like it's the naughty section back there. And then I'm looking at this collar and all this stuff, and I'm going, if I make this, I'm going to look stupid. I'm not going to do it. I close the book. I'm walking out of the store, and I see one display rack of quilting books. And I see a sampler quilt, kind of looked traditional. I didn't even know anything about quilting like I do now. I'm just seeing something that vaguely looked like a quilt on there. And I'm thinking, I could do that. That quilt, I could do that. Nobody will ever see it. And it's got to be easy because there's no collars or cuffs. Little did I know what I was up against. But I bought that book, and I start making my templates out of my honeycomb cereal box. And it says to draw on them with, mark them. And I did. I used a ballpoint pen. It says cut out 1/4-inch seams. I thought it meant sort of. Boy, was it not AccuQuilt. Okay? And then it said sew those suckers together with a 1/4-inch seam. And I truly, truly, truly thought the book meant sort of in the ballpark. I did not know it meant to be really 1/4 inch. So my blocks all ranged anywhere from 11 to 13 inches. And you can laugh, but yours do too. Except for those of you that are using AccuQuilt. Right? All right, so anyway, so that was the story of me getting involved in quilting. And it wasn't long before I was in a Ben Franklin store. I was minding my own business, kind of shopping for fabric. I'm awkward. It's not the place I belong. It's the fabric section. And this little lady with kind of blue rinse in her hair comes around the corner. And she looked at me and says, "What are you doing back here?" I'm looking at fabric. "What do you use fabric for?" I went, "I'm making a quilt." "You're a quilter?" Making a quilt does not a quilter one neck, just so you know. And so I thought she was done with me, and I'm just looking at fabrics, and I noticed that there's some commotion going on over here. And lo and behold, I look off to my side, and out comes a quilt top. Thrown out in front of me. She says, "What color border would you put on this one?" I'm looking at it. It's a scrap quilt. Any color would be fine. I said, "I'm pretty partial to blue." That day, she bought blue. And I didn't realize this till about a year ago. That was the day, the moment in time at the Ben Franklin on Brentwood Boulevard in St. Louis, Missouri, that I, Ricky Timms, became a quilt teacher. Blue. All the students wants is the answer. Blue. Blue will be fine. She says, "What quilt guild do you belong to?" I says, What quilt guild do you belong to?" I said, "I don't understand." She says, "Groups of quilters." And I said, "There's groups of you?" She said, "Oh yes, we meet in the basement of the Presbyterian Church in Webster's Grove, Missouri. Second Friday of every month. You should come." Well, I'm going to go because I want to see these quilters that I did not know exist. And I know what they all look like. Her. And I know that they're going to be sitting around a quilting frame, and I know what they're going to be doing. Gossiping. So I'm going to go ask some questions to these ladies that particularly know quilting, because I've been quilting for 3 months and didn't know a single person. So I showed up that night. And when I got into the parking lot, there was an awful lot of cars. I thought, well, something else must be going on at the church. I'm expecting 8 ladies around a quilting frame. I walk into the door and there ain't no quilting frame to be seen, but there's 250 of her. And the first person comes straight up to me and goes, "Oh, you must be Ricky. I heard you was coming." I said, "Heard? Heard? That you guys, you have jungle drums. You got tin cans and strings. You spread..." A man was coming to the quilt meeting. They heard I was coming. Now, I could continue this story, but the truth, the rest is truly history. I was welcomed into the guild. I learned from those ladies. I've taken 2 quilting classes in my life. But boy, have I learned from the School of Hard Knocks. And I have suddenly, I continued to conduct. I was conducting choirs in churches, but there was a time in 1998 that I said, "I'm jumping into the quilting net head first, and I sure hope it catches me." And all I could say is, "Here I am. Here I am." I could not be happier. I could not imagine a life more fulfilled and more rewarding. I could not imagine. We were talking last night in the gallery. I had heart surgery in the year 2000. I had a quadruple heart bypass at the age of 44. Only one of those quilts in the gallery was made prior to that. And I look at this body of work that's come after, the music and the quilts that's come after, and I think, gosh, thank God I'm alive for all of that got to happen, because it means a lot to me. And I think about everybody's life now. I remember I told you at the beginning that anything I'm doing today, I want it to be your stories that you're remembering of your granny or your mom or your aunt, or something that happened, or where you fished, or where you rode your bike, or what school teacher taught you and nurtured you and made you be the person that you were. That's what it's all about today. But I get the people coming to me oftentimes. They come up and they'll say, "I just hate you." They say it in a nice way because they say, you're funny, you're talented, you're a musician, you're a quilter, you do this, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff that Steve was saying, okay? I hate you. And I know it's a compliment because I know what they mean. But the truth of the matter is they're trying to say, Ricky, you have a life that's far superior and better than mine. You're just really doing something great with your life, and I'm just a little old nothing. And the truth of the matter is there's not a person in this room that's a little old nothing. Now listen to me for a moment. It's true. I don't care where you think you are in life. I want to tell you one last story. Many years ago, there was a man. I don't know his name, Bob. Let's call him Bob. He was married. He had a boy and a girl. Wouldn't that be kind of a logical, normal order of just the fantasy world? Well, had a dog and a cat, and it would be in that order too. And then a white house and a picket fence. He had a job, going to work every day as a salesman. It's kind of average. And he got 2 weeks of vacation every year so he could go to the beach with his kids. Does any of that sound earth-shattering? Seriously. It's just a guy. But that guy had a job. And on one Saturday, he was a salesman doing his job, and a young, grieving couple come in and say, we're looking for a new sewing machine. And he goes, well, come right over here. We got this one, which is a little better, and I prefer this one personally because it has zigzag and reverse. And he helps them with the decision to purchase this sewing machine that my granny takes home and spends years probably remembering and grieving the loss of a son. She gets married. I get the sewing machine. Here I am. The interesting thing about that, to me, is that man's everyday, ordinary life is part of the puzzle that puts me here with you. It puts us together. It gives me a life that I would have never dreamed. And there is no way under God's earth that he, 57 years ago, and I'm sure he's dead now, but he would have never known how that day in his ordinary life would spin forward in history. That's why you are an important person on this planet, because you influence everybody's life without even knowing it. That's the story that I really have to share with you today. And I will tell you, every stitch that you make into your quilts, every time you put something together and you're having a happy moment, you are writing your autobiography. You are telling your story in fabric. People will look back and go, there's Grandma's quilts. Remember that pink phase she went through? She went through all that. Okay. Oh, this was the time she switched to the AccuQuilt. Look how things got so much better. Okay? Seriously. You are writing your story in fabric. And your story is important to all those that you know and all of those that will come after. So let's celebrate that. You say? Okay? Woo-hoo!